In this video, we're going to take a look at some resources that help us to explore the role that colonialism played in fueling some of the ethnic tensions and conflict in post-colonial Africa. So first of all, let me set a little bit of the context of what I'm doing with this. This is with some GCSE classes, and we've been looking at this little exercise of trying to come up with a schema that helps us to explore in broad brushstrokes some of the overviews of some of the challenges that sub-Saharan Africa faces. So we looked at the backdrop here of barriers from colonialism that have existed then. But what I wanted to do was to introduce here something of how that fed into some of the ethnic tensions and conflicts within the continent of Africa. Now, here's an interesting place to start. Do a Google image search for African, and what comes up? Now here's the question to ask the pupils. What do you see? What are you looking at here? What are the images and what are the stereotypes? When you look at something like this, are you seeing a uniformity or a diversity? It's an interesting question to ask. How diverse is the continent of Africa? Now, the reality is that the continent of Africa is an awful lot more diverse than some people might think. It might well be that some students look at those images and see more in common than they see in terms of diversity. But once you start to add some data and some information in from this source, I got this from this map in the Washington Post of Max Fisher, who put some material together. I'll put the link for that down below in the description. And I mapped it on here using ArcGIS, and if you look here, there's some very, very interesting patterns that begin to emerge. Let's go into Europe, for example. Now, we might be used to thinking of Europe being quite a diverse and multicultural place, but according to this rating, it's nowhere near as diverse and multicultural as Africa. So if any of the students have any kind of perceptions of this quote-unquote African person, this is a great way of showing how those perceptions might be misplaced. But of course, this map pastes this ethnic diversity onto the current country breakup of the continent of Africa. However, if we turn on a map that's not defined by the contemporary country borders, but by the actual ethnic groups itself, all of a sudden we see a much more diverse than you would perhaps have imagined. Now bear in mind again, if we scroll through that Google image search of an African, and if students are thinking that there is more similarity there than there is difference, this map can absolutely explode that. Even if you scroll down here through the key, the sheer number of different ethnic groups that there are in Africa. And particularly if you want to come down in here into sub-Saharan Africa, look how fine-grained that is. All these different ethnic groups that exist. But there's more we can do with this, because we can turn on a layer that shows you the countries over the top. And there's lots that you can explore in here as you're coming in. Why is this country boundary of Angola drawn where it is? Why does it include that diversity of ethnic groups? And more importantly, why does it bisect some of those ethnic groups, dividing them into two different countries? And why is that division marked very often by straight lines? Borders follow geographical features very often. There is no geographical feature that I know of that's that straight for that length and that distance. And even where they aren't straight, even where they do weave around, look at how many times they bisect different ethnic groups. Now, the level of fine-grained detail that you can go in there and explore through that and compare and contrast the contemporary country borders with the actual ethnic groups, because you're literally laying a GIS layer on top. And it's a great way of getting into that discussion of those decisions taken in the cities of Europe when maps were taken out and rulers were placed along and lines were drawn through place with no regard whatsoever for the ethnic makeup of the peoples that were going to be affected by this. Which brings us all the way back then to the colonial rule. Colonial rule in Africa in 1914, and it matches up with the colonising countries in Europe and the countries in Africa that were colonised by them. I can come in here and I can apply a filter. I'll click on this for the filter, and I want to pick the colonial name is France, and then I want to add another expression. The colonizer is France, and I just need to come to this checkbox here, display features in the layer that match all of the expressions or match any of the expressions. So I want either of those to be true, and I'm going to apply the filter, and what it will do is to pull out for me the colonizer and the countries that were colonized within Africa. And do that with any of them. You can explore how the different European countries colonized different parts of the continent of Africa. If I just remove that and turn that back again, and then I can turn on this layer again of the world countries and see how much the modern boundaries match up with the colonial areas. There's a very, very close relationship between those. So why are the country boundaries where they are today? Why is it that you've got this straight line between Sudan and Chad? You can see that that straight line matches up with some of those previous colonial boundaries. So what you've got here is a set of resources that really allow you to see how this colonialization of the continent of Africa really laid on top of this rich, diverse tapestry of ethnic groups and imposed a uniformity and imposed country boundaries right over the top with scant regard of the ethnic groups underneath.